Welcome back to this episode of Being Above the Line, where we talk about how to help other people to regulate their emotions. Previously, we spent a lot of time on our own emotions and regulating ourselves, but this time it's the very important aspect of regulating other people's emotions. And we will share a 4-step process, and we will apply those 4 steps to some very specific examples so you can see in very specific ways how we apply these 4 steps to help others to regulate. And the question I have for you, the person who is listening or watching us right now, is when was the last time that you were faced with, let's say, a team member or a client or a stakeholder who got emotionally triggered by something? Could be anything that really triggered them. Maybe they got angry, maybe they got worried or sad or overwhelmed. And in that moment, when that other person was, let's say, triggered or dropped below the line, did you have the tools to help them get back on an even keel so that you could continue moving forward and having a constructive conversation? That's what this episode is all about. Together with Annmarie Curley, we'll look at the steps you can take, these 4 steps that can help you to help others to self-regulate. And we have some very, I would say, common examples that hopefully you can recognize, but these are just by way of illustrating how you might use these 4 steps. It could be a stakeholder who is worried about a change that you want to implement, but they're worried they can't cope with it, or for some reason they don't agree with the change. Sometimes we call this resistance to change. For sure, that stakeholder will be feeling triggered. Another example might be a manager who's angry because there has, for whatever reason, been a delay. Could be a delay that's within your control or outside of your control, but the end result, I think, is the same. That manager or that client is not happy. And the better you are at helping to regulate their emotions, the more constructive that meeting will be. And a third example might be a team member who just feels overwhelmed. Could be a team member or a peer of yours. Feels overwhelmed because there's too much on their plate and they are potentially just about to break down with stress. And again, you need to help them regulate. So I guess it's pretty self-explanatory why this is important, because if other people are dysregulated, if other people are what we call below the line, they're not able to think clearly, they're not able to think rationally, they're in a way being hijacked by their emotional brain. So this is where you can really step in and help them. Now, you are not, and I want to stress this, you're not responsible for other people's emotions, you're not responsible for other people's state of mind. So it's not your job to help others, to help regulate others. But with these 4 steps, it's just an extra tool in your toolbox that you can use when required, so that you can move forward and collaborate more easily with these people at work. And remember, as always, you can use these techniques at home as well. So for those of you who have watched the episode with us previously, you'll be familiar with this concept of being above the line or below the line. If you haven't watched previous episodes, you can follow the links in the description below this video. But essentially, when you're above the line, you're in a state of openness. You can collaborate. There's no noise on the line. There's no disrupting negative emotions. You think laterally, you think creatively. And that's obviously where we want to be most of the time. And that's where we would like our team members to be most of the time. On the contrary, when you're below the line, you're feeling triggered by something, you're feeling overwhelmed by an emotion. It could be overly angry, overly worried, overly sad, or frustrated, any kind of emotion that kind of moves your attention from your logical brain to your emotional brain. And I imagine, and I hope this topic is relevant to those of you listening. And now I want to bring in Annmarie, and I want to ask you, Annmarie, if you, first of all, how you relate to this, and if you agree that this is hopefully a topic that people can relate to and have situations that are relevant to.
Yeah, well, I think we're all sort of in the same business of managing complex projects and complex work. And in that environment, there's always situations where things can get complicated and emotions can become pretty heated. And as you were asking some of those questions, I was actually thinking about myself and how I've been in situations where I've reacted in a way that, looking back isn't something that I would want to do, right? So I think many of us have been both the actor acting out the stress and maybe the recipient of someone else who's been in a stressful situation. So I think it's a really important topic, and it's really important to bring some of these examples to light as well, so we can talk about how we can navigate them. And I also want to mention that as I was just listening to you do the introduction, I was also thinking about unconsciously stressed people. So, sometimes it's easier if you recognize that you're stressed and you recognize that you're tired and that you're emotional. You can sometimes inject that space to do something about it. But there's a lot of people that are running unconsciously stressed, and they're sprinting around trying to get stuff done, unconsciously stressed. And I think that's where it's really important to bring awareness to the table, to just really understand how you feel yourself as you're thinking about how do you apply this to team settings.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely recognize that part of being unconsciously stressed. I thought, I'm fine, I'm loving what I do.
Yeah.
But there was this underlying tension all along, which actually has been draining my body for resources. So that's
Yeah.
not exactly the topic here, but that's
No, but I think
important.
it's important. Yeah. And then so the other thing I think that many of us in this new world where we're dealing with a lot of people on camera, and sometimes it's sort of easier for people in general to stay calm when they're sitting in a room with people. There tends to be less eruptions and tends to be less visible friction, I think, at least that's my experience. But when you're on a virtual call with people, if they're on camera or off camera, I think it's easier for people to become more flustered or to become more upset with things, because it feels like there's a little bit of they're maybe removed from the situation. And so it can be really tricky if someone's in a stress response in a meeting, and even if they're not on camera, it's sort of easier if they're on camera and you can see their facial expression, you know what they're thinking, and you can sort of have that engagement with them. But sometimes, people are off camera and they're coming out with statements that sort of land the wrong way across the team. And I think it's really important to think about how to navigate those situations and try to bring balance into those conversations as well. So hopefully we can talk about that a little bit today as well.
Yeah, and you're definitely giving us a challenge there, because when you don't see people, it's so much more challenging. And the tools we'll share today can be used both in a one-on-one setting, which probably is the easiest if you have somebody in front of you, because you have a better feeling for how they're responding. And they can also be used in group settings, which end of the day are much more challenging, because you have the dynamic of several people playing in there.
Yeah, and the energy of all of that swirling.
Yeah. So let's jump in and actually talk about the first step. So there's 4 steps in total. And the first step let's remind ourselves, this is about regulating other people's emotions and their mental state. The first step is to regulate your own state of mind, your own emotional state. Because if you are upset yourself, it's very hard to calm somebody else down. If you are worried yourself, it's very hard to convince somebody else they shouldn't be worried. It's, I think, near impossible. And people will feel that it's not authentic. So that's why the first step is notice your own emotional state, and regulate yourself. And we have the go-to tool that we have for you, that we have been sharing in previous episodes, I think almost every episode, but especially episode 2, is this quick coherence breathing technique. And you can go back and watch that, but actually we'll do a quick recap right now. So whatever state you're in at the moment, you should be able to feel an effect when we breathe in this specific way. So I would invite everybody who is listening or watching to simply breathe a bit deeper and slower than usual. You can put your hand on your chest, and you can imagine, as you breathe slowly and deeply, that you're breathing directly in and out through your heart. Just something you're imagining. So you breathe slowly and deeply imagining that you're breathing directly in and out through your heart. And then you bring to mind a really positive emotion. Could be gratefulness or love. And you just imagine breathing this beautiful emotion in and out through your heart center. Slowly and deeply. And as you do this, you should feel that your state changes. Actually, if you just take time to do this for a few minutes, your biochemistry will change in your body. And we've shared this in previous episodes that you can do this without other people noticing. So you're in this meeting, you're on this call, you don't have to put your hand on your chest, you don't have to close your eyes. You can simply become aware of your breath, and you can slow it down. You can relax your body and let go of tension, because what that does, it prevents you from spiraling out of control with your own emotions. And that's what we're after here. We need you to be steady so you can help steady others. What do you want to add here, Annmarie?
Well, when I'm teaching this in class, I try to tell people to put some anchor points into their day to practice this. So, if you're driving to work and you're stopped at a red light or something, that can be a cue. Oh, hey, let me do the quick coherence. If you're clicking on a link to go into a Teams call or a Zoom call, like just practice it while you're waiting on that link to come up. So insert some anchor points in your day where you're practicing this, because the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And the easier it becomes this natural state where when it really matters, you'll then be able to use this to insert a space in between a situation and your response to it. And that'll give you time to really think about your response and respond intentionally versus reacting into the vibration of whatever's going on in that moment. So practice this, put it in at the start of your day, put it in at anchor points during the day, and practice it when it doesn't really matter, so that you can become really proficient at it when it really does matter.
Yeah, that's so true, because many people say, no, I forgot. In that moment, I forgot because I got worried myself and I forgot to breathe. So I think what you're saying there, Annmarie, is brilliant, because it builds that muscle, right? So we practice it.
Yep. And that's a really good analogy, actually. If you don't build a muscle, then you won't get fit, right? So if you don't do any of the weightlifting, you won't get fit. So it's the same type of idea. And also just recognize if you're feeling, if your own person is feeling tired, if you're running around trying to get stuff done, then it's actually harder for you to remember to do that. And I would say, don't be too hard on yourself. Sometimes it's easier to see these situations in reflection when you're reflecting back at the end of the day and you think, oh, I missed these 3 opportunities. Well, make note of it, because then tomorrow you'll get another chance. And when you get another chance, you'll remember to do it. So that brings back in the reflection that we've talked about in prior episodes as well.
Yeah, we're not aiming for perfection. We're aiming for awareness, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's step number 1, is, as far as you can, becoming aware of your own state and regulating your own state. And that's state of mind, state of emotions. Now we're moving to step number 2, which is focusing on the other person. And step number 2 is about being fully present with the other person and actually listening to what they have to say. And I think sometimes many of us, and I see this all the time, we have this tendency, if somebody is worried, we'll go, oh, no, don't be worried. And then we just bombard them with a number of arguments for why this will be fine and why they shouldn't worry. And that person just gets more and more tense. So what we're saying here is actually the opposite. Ask the other person, give them your full attention and listen. Ask them, tell me about your concern. So instead of closing off, we actually open up. And you may think in that moment, I don't have time to listen to them, so I'm going to cut them off. But it's not a good recipe if you want. Let's remember that what the goal here, to help regulate them. If you close the door on somebody, they're just going to push harder. So what we're saying is that you ask them, tell me about your concern, or you can also summarize by saying, I understand what I'm hearing is that your concern is so and so. In other words, let the other person vent, let them share all of their concerns. It will empty them out, and it actually will give you some valuable information. You don't have to agree with what they're saying. You're simply listening to them. And in listening, I want to share that there are 3 different levels of listening. These are 3 levels that we are taught as when we take our coaching diploma, or when I took my coaching diploma, we were taught these 3 levels of listening. Level 1 is the level at which most people are listening, and it's probably the level that the viewer is listening at right now. So we call it internal listening. So I'm listening to your voice, but at the same time, I'm listening to my own internal dialogue. What is she saying? How can I apply this? Oh, how long is this recording? Because I'm hungry. And, you know, we kind of listening to multiple tracks. So if you want to fully listen to a team member, then this is not good enough. If you really want to give somebody your attention, try to listen at level 2 at least. Level 2 is focused listening. It means that you are truly, fully focused on the other person. You're not worried about what you're going to say next. You are focused on them. But believe it or not, there is a 3rd level of listening, which is even higher, and we call that global listening. So with global listening, I'm not just listening so intensely to your words. I'm listening so intensely that I pick up what you're not saying. So you could say that I'm using my intuition as well. I'm kind of somehow noticing. That's why we call it global listening. I'm noticing if there's congruence or discongruence. Are you smiling, but you're saying you're worried? Are you saying that everything is fine, but your body language is tense? So I'm listening with all of my senses, and that's hard, but you can try to listen to the highest level you can. Yeah, do you have any comments to this step, Annmarie?
Yeah, so while you were talking, I was doing the HeartMath quick coherence technique so that I could just listen fully to what you were expressing. And if anybody was watching, you can play it back and see, would you even notice that I was doing that? So if you find that you're impatient and someone's talking to you, you can use that just as you're listening, and that will help you be a better listener. I do want to say, if you're talking to someone and they're actually in a stress response, so you know they're up here, sort of like we call it high beta brainwave, where they are dysregulated, they're emotional about it, and their perspective is quite narrowed onto the situation. They're in a brainwave state that's not coherent, and you're not going to be able to reason with them in that state of mind. And so, you know, I sometimes liken it to, you know, if you come around the corner out of the car and you had groceries and there was a big grizzly bear 3 feet away from you at your front door, you're going to be focused in on the bear, right? Not on all the other stuff around. So when someone's in a stress response, they're hyper focused into the situation and they can't see the forest for the trees, and no amount of reasoning with them is going to help them get back to that place. You have to let them sort of de-escalate and come back to a place of homeostasis and regulation so that you could have a conversation with them that helps move into a solutioning situation. So either when you're listening to them, you either have to be able to see if you can bring them back to that place and they can calm down so that you can have that conversation, or listen fully and then be able to hit a pause and say, you know what, can I think about this? Can I take some time to really digest what you're saying to me? And can we regroup a little bit later, and give everybody a chance to sort of calm down and get back to a regulated place so that you can have a reasonable conversation and really then think about what the solutions are.
Yeah, very true. So should we move on to step number 3? And I just want to, before I mention step number 3, say that it can be that the order of step number 2 and 3 sometimes can move around, because step number 3 is closely related to number 2. We were listening intensely and fully. Step number 3, we are acknowledging the other person's emotion. So before, in step number 2, we basically ask the other person, what are you thinking? Tell me about everything that's on your mind. Now we're focusing more on their emotions, and we are not making their emotion wrong. We're doing the opposite. We're saying, for instance, oh, I can hear that you're really worried or frustrated. So I'm validating their emotion. Or even if I don't agree with them, let's say we don't agree to the way forward, but this other person is really upset. I can validate them by saying, I can understand that this is causing you to feel upset. I'm not saying I agree. I'm not saying you shouldn't be upset. That's not going to help them. I am acknowledging their emotion. And that's what this second step is all about. It's hearing them. I hear you. Doesn't mean I agree, but I hear you and I see you and I respect your emotion. So sometimes it might be appropriate to first do that and then so step number 2 and 3 can sometimes swap around. What's important is that you do both. You let them speak their mind, step 2, and you acknowledge their emotions.
Can I say something here?
Absolutely.
I think what's important is you're not sort of validating what they're saying, but you're validating that you heard them, and remember that their perspective is their reality. So, factually, there might be some differences in what you see and what they see. You might have 2 different perspectives, but a person's perspective is their reality, and you have to honor their reality as they see it and try to understand it so that you can help them move through it.
Yeah. Brilliant. And that actually brings us to step number 4, which is the last of the steps, which is now the person, because we've listened to them, we've validated their emotions, we've actually we've really been interested. So now they're beginning to move further above the line. And that means that they're coming back, they're kind of moving from that emotional limbic brain, hopefully forward to the rational brain. And if they're not moving, it means we need to spend more time on step 2 and 3. So how do we know that we're ready for step 4? Because the other person's beginning to calm down. So they're beginning to get better regulated. So in step 4, essentially, we can collaborate better. We can begin to ask more open questions. We can begin to help them look at this from a different perspective. We can begin to go into more of a solution mode together. But the mistake that many make is that we go straight to step number 4, trying to convince them, trying to help them reframe it, trying to tell them why they shouldn't feel, how they're feeling. But if we miss step 2 and 3, that's not a good recipe. So in step 4, essentially, we ask a different kind of question. Again, I love leading with open questions. So here we could say to them, okay, what's another way we could look at this? What do you feel we need to do to move forward from here? Or who can help us? Do we need to ask another person? Or what do we need to do to come to an agreement? There are hundreds of different questions you can ask, but these are just examples to show you that these types of open questions without an agenda, it's just, let's just collaborate to see what we need to do here. We're not emotionally triggered anymore. Now we can think rationally. We can begin perhaps to see this from a new perspective.
Yeah, can I add 2 other questions?
Absolutely.
I also, I love questions around like, what assumptions are we making? What assumptions are playing into this? Or, is there something going on that we might not be seeing? Like, what might we not be fully aware of? Just to sort of continue to broaden the horizon for bringing in other people's perspectives.
Yeah. Yeah, really good. I know I like what if questions. I'm trying to think of a what if question that's relevant here, but it could be, what if we had unlimited resources? How could we resolve this issue? What if questions are interesting. So Annmarie, I think we want to give people some examples of how in real terms they can apply these 4 steps. Do you have a couple of 1 or 2 examples for us?
Yeah, so we often do these really big projects that are business transformation projects as we modernize technology, business systems. And so one of the the very frequent challenges that we come up with is resistance to change. And, we often hear, core team members or even stakeholders say something along the lines of, well, this system's not going to work for us. This new solution's worse than what we've had already. This is never going to work for our team. This is a waste of time. These decisions were made without our input. My working life's going to be worse. I'm going to have 10 extra steps to do, and lots of statements that reflect a resistance to the change that's underway. And so that's one of the key areas to address. So if you were the project leader in that situation, dealing with someone who is resistant to change, then, we could talk through the 4 steps. So firstly, regulate yourself, right? So take a deep breath and remember that you're trying to just listen and not react. Be present and listen to what their concerns are. Acknowledge the frustration, acknowledge their perspective, give them space to voice those concerns fully, validate those feelings. I hear you're really frustrated about this. I hear that you're really concerned about what your working life is going to be like once this system's implemented. You're really concerned about how this might impact your team. And then maybe ask some investigation and exploration questions. Well, if you had magic wand, how would you want it to work? What are the challenges that you really see here in your step-by-step process? What does it really look like? And try to sort of really get to the situation underneath the symptom that they're seeing. Often there's a core root cause problem that's underneath whatever it is that's manifesting on top, right? The symptom can be very different than what that root cause is. And so you really want to explore and investigate so that you fully understand what's driving the concern, because it might not be what they're saying and what's coming across. So that's one example that I think comes up quite a bit on these large transformation projects.
Yeah, and resistance to change is very, very common. Do you want to take us through another one?
So another one, I guess, would be, we mentioned group meetings earlier, and, maybe a manager or someone senior coming onto a group meeting and expressing very visible frustration about the situation that's unfolding. So maybe something's been delayed or something's been delivered, but it's not at the quality level that the team would expect it to be. Or, something was supposed to have been done by Friday and it's not going to be done for another 6 weeks, and because the person doing it didn't fully understand the requirements. I don't know, there's lots and lots of examples that we could give on projects around this. But, someone comes onto a meeting and is like, well, we can't keep doing this. This is not the first time that this has been delayed. You guys got to get your act together. If we're going to keep doing this, we're going to miss our deadline. If we miss our deadline, we have to delay for another 3 months because we can only go live on a quarter end. That's going to cost us $1 gazillion. I'm not going to bat for this. You guys are going to be held accountable. Get your shit together, basically. Oops. Excuse the French, but get your stuff together, figure it out. And so you've got a lot of anger and a lot of emotion coming at you from a senior person on a call with a team that's probably working quite hard to make whatever it is happen that needs to happen. So, that I think there's a couple of dynamics there, right? So the person is senior. They're on a call that's got a lot of people on it at probably multiple levels. As a leader that a lot of the people on the call are doing their day job and they're doing their project work. That there's probably some things that's driving the situation that's occurred. So you have to really, remember to regulate yourself first, calm yourself down, and be present and listen. I think the trick on this type of call is whether you address it directly or whether you take it offline, and how much you address directly in front of a group like that when the person is more senior than you. So, you can address the feelings. You can say, I hear that you are very frustrated. I can understand what's driving that frustration. I really want to dive deep and fully understand how we got here and what our options are. So, Tim or Dave or whoever it is that's sort of delivering the thing that's late, let's you and I stay on the call. You can keep the other manager on the call. Also, you can offer them to stay on the call as well. And like a small group talks through it together, and release everybody else. You can say, let's think about how we're going to talk through this. Let's think about what our other options are, and just sort of bring a balanced approach to the meeting. Clearly, this person's very senior, so you're not going to want to be chastising them for like their reaction, but you could also then have a one-off conversation with them saying, hey, look, I get that you're totally frustrated, help me understand what else is driving that. Have that one-on-one conversation with them afterwards, and have them understand that there's an impact to them showing up in that way with the team, and have them just understand that bringing that dynamic onto a group call isn't really helpful when you're trying to do the things that you're trying to do, which are quite tricky. So, regulating yourself, handling it, deciding what you handle right there and then versus taking offline, and then being able to be present and listen with the individuals affected, either together as a small group. Sometimes you can dive into it as part of the team meeting, but I think you want to be very careful about how you do that, because if someone's already stressed and triggered and you're in a group setting, now you've got an audience for that triggered situation. And it just, that's not a good situation to be in. It's not a good look for them in front of the rest of the team. And it doesn't make everybody else feel good about the work they're doing. And it can shut down how people are feeling. And they can walk away with negative feelings around that and feeling very discouraged. So I think you have to play that one very, very carefully, and then decide how to redirect the call. But, you don't ignore it, but you have to redirect the call and manage the call and then deal with it offline. So I don't know, how would you do something different there, Susanne? What do you think?
It's interesting because I actually had a coaching session previously today, and exactly this came up. So the manager I was coaching, he had a disagreement with another manager, a peer, and they disagreed about one of the teams and what was wrong with that team. One thought they needed more process. The other said, no, there's not process that's a problem, because they don't follow the process. And there were 10 other people on the call. Now, the topic that they were discussing wasn't central to that the meeting wasn't about this team. It just came up in passing. So they took it offline. And what we discussed in retrospect was the person I was coaching could have, because he didn't, have acknowledged the other person's emotions. Just as you said, I can hear that you're feeling upset about this. I sense there's a disalignment between us. Let's take it offline because it's not relevant to all other 10 people. I would say the exception is when we are in a meeting when we disagree about the solution and we're here to talk about the solution, then we actually need to put it on the table in that meeting.
Yeah.
Because if we just delay it, we're not moving forward.
Yeah.
So you're right, it depends on the context.
Yeah, I think that's the art of project leadership and the art of leadership generally, right?
Right.
Between knowing how to maneuver through those situations and when to shine a spotlight on something versus when to take something offline and deal with it in a one-on-one situation.
Yeah, and I want to mention again the importance of preparing for some of these meetings. Listen, this can come up in the middle of the meeting, and this is what we're saying, do these steps to try and regulate. Sometimes we have a suspicion that something might come up, and we can actually just talk ourselves through some of these steps and have a few questions, nice open questions prepared in case they are relevant. I also want to talk to Annmarie the fact that somebody might not be on camera, because we mentioned that in the introduction. So let's imagine somebody is dropping below the line, they're upset or angry about something or worried, and they're not on camera. And I would say that the same 4 steps applies, just that we have to work a little harder because we can't see their body language, but we can still ask them openly, I sense that there's a worry here. Would you like to share what that is, just so we're all on the same page? And then we listen fully. And or we can acknowledge their emotion by saying, I sense, again, I hold the mirror up. I hear that you're frustrated. Do you want to share more about that?
Yeah.
But we have to listen more because we can't see them, but the steps are the same.
Yeah, and I think also when someone's not on camera, they might be dealing with something else. Like they could be calling in from the car, trying to get their kid at school, right? And this meeting's on their calendar and they're calling in, and you're hearing stress in their voice. And it might not be stress related to the project. It might be stress related to what else is going on around them. So you have to be careful about what you're judging in terms of their tone, and sort of go into it with open exploration, because it might not be relevant. They might be expressing something. They might not be frustrated about it. They might just be, someone might have just cut them off in traffic, and they're dealing with that situation in their car while trying to navigate through an important call, right? That's life. That's sort of the life we're in right now, or that comes up quite a bit.
Yeah. But again, if we don't ask, we don't know.
Right.
So hopefully this will give our listeners and viewers some good examples. There are, I hesitate to say millions, but thousands, hundreds. There are so many different situations that we find ourselves in. Just the last one we might mention is, let's imagine you have a team member who feels overwhelmed. Maybe you're in a one-on-one setting with them. Maybe they report to you, or maybe they don't report to you, but you're their project manager or a manager. And you just sense that they're like dithering. They feel overwhelmed. I mean, there's different signs of overwhelm, but you pick up that they're not in a good space. And again, you might be worried if you sense that they can't complete their tasks. So again, the first step is for you to regulate yourself. You could say something to yourself. You could use a breathing technique. You could also say to yourself, it's going to be fine. My priority right now is a team member. Let's put my other worries aside. How do we get this work done? Let's put it aside. Let me right now focus on the team member and be fully present with them. So regulate yourself, relax your body, let go of the tension in your shoulders, relax your belly. That's a good way to regulate yourself. Again, be fully present with them, listen, ask them what's going on, ask them what worries them, ask them what's on their plate, and just have them offload on you and say, again, acknowledge their emotions by saying, I sense that this is challenging for you at the moment. We'll find a solution. And when you notice that they begin to calm down because they feel that you're supportive, then you can go into more of a rational conversation. Step number 4, where you have an open conversation about how can we, what needs to happen here? Is this about giving you more time? Is it about asking somebody else to help you? What's the root of this, and how do we move forward? Ask some really open questions and explore it together. The pitfall can be that we think, I don't have time for this conversation. And that is a pitfall, because that is not, very rarely will that serve you. It will come back and bite you, because the issue doesn't go away. And the steps that we've shared today actually also helps you to build trust with somebody, because one of the biggest gifts you can give somebody is the gift of your attention and your time. So I heard something really interesting on a podcast I listened to yesterday, where somebody said, the more conflicts you have with somebody, the better. Because every time you have a conflict, it's an opportunity to work together and resolve it. And every time you resolve a conflict, you demonstrate that you're strong. So I think it's a nice way to reframe conflict. We have to come together to solve it. And every time we do, we reconfirm that we're a strong team, whether it's a couple or whatever it is. So obviously the opposite could also happen. If we don't resolve the conflict every time, we drift further apart because we don't have the ability to solve conflict together.
Yeah, I think that's really important. The other saying that comes to mind is, a problem shared is a problem halved. So, sometimes people need to just process and talk something out loud and feel like they're supported in their feelings. So just, some of that, sometimes that's all that's needed as well.
Yeah, lovely. Love it. And with that, I think it's time to wrap up today's episode. And I want to thank everybody for listening. As always, these tools can be used at home and at work. And it's only by taking action that you get real results. And we love your feedback. So please share in the comments what feedback you have if you've tried these out. Just to recap the 4 steps: in helping others to regulate. Number one, regulate yourself. Use the breath if it's always there available to help you regulate your own emotions. Step number two, be fully present and listen to the other person. Raise your level of listening, so you listen with all of your senses. Step number three, which sometimes is reverse, step 2, 3, but make sure you do them. Step number three is to acknowledge the other person's emotions. Don't make them wrong. And lastly, you can move into more of a solutioning phase, or an investigative phase, where we ask questions about how we can move forward and reframe it. Yeah. Any final comments, Annmarie?
No, I would love to hear people's real life experiences trying these types of tools. What works for you, what doesn't work for you. So come back and let us know.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and enjoy the tools.
Bye for now.
Bye.